What problems are you dealing with in your life right now?
Do you feel like giving up? Times are hard and you're not strong. Well, I know the answer for you, and it will lead to real truth. Don't look back to yesterday.
Now there are answers.
Tomorrow's on the
Welcome to
way.
Live Prayer.
It's waiting.
And welcome to Live Prayer. I am Bill Keller. It's good to be with you on this Wednesday evening. I pray it's been a great day for you. You're watching Live Prayer, where we come to you live and in living color every Monday through Friday, 11 to midnight Eastern Daylight Time, wherever you may be across this great land of ours. Sea to shining sea, border to what was a border for at least a little while. Had a reminder of that today. I want to welcome you to the program. Our friends in other far-off great lands, welcome to you as well. Once again, I'm Bill Keller, founder of LivePrayer.com, world's largest interactive Christian website. Reach a little over 2.5 million folks each day via the internet. Please check us out online. Web address on your screen, LivePrayer.com, LivePrayer.com. Don't be shocked when you go to the website. I've got nothing to sell you. No books, tapes, trinkets, no advertising. Just 22 years of great Frontlines ministry content produced by Live Prayer and available for free. Just go to the website, easy to navigate, literally thousands upon thousands, no exaggeration, of content. Again, all produced by Live Prayer over these past 2+ decades. Pray it's been a good day for you. Lots going on tonight. And once again, I'd love to sit and chit-chat for a few minutes, but we got a lot of content to get to. I don't think we'll get to all of it tonight. That's fine. We'll get through what we get through. God knows what we need to hear tonight. We'll push whatever's left for tomorrow, right? Going to have a lot of content for the rest of this week. I can tell you that already. This is going to be one of those weeks. By the way, if you missed last night's program, please go watch it. We keep all of our old programs on Facebook, on our Live Prayer Facebook and Twitter pages, as well as our Live Prayer TV YouTube page. Of course, if you're a Roku viewer, and welcome to our Roku audience. I sometimes neglect to mention you folks, but you're in my hearts all the time. Great audience on Roku with their new software package now. Of course, I think they archived the last 4 or 5 programs. So please make sure you watch last night's program. It was, again, tons of information, just like tonight and tomorrow, and I'm sure Friday. All right, let's have a word of prayer. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight. So grateful for that promise in your word, where 2 or 3 gather in your, you are in the midst. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, you are in the midst. And we thank you for your presence tonight to guide this hour. Lord, I lift up my dear friends tonight, their families. I pray for their needs. We're grateful for a day today that wasn't promised to us, but it was a gift from you. We're thankful for the blessings of this day. And now, Lord, I pray that you just remove all the clutter of the world from our minds for a few minutes now as we get together to discuss the things that we need to hear and understand, that you open our hearts, open our minds to receive the things from you we need to receive. And Lord, we're again grateful for your presence. We commit this time to you. Use it for your glory. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen and amen. All right, let me just jump right in. This is going to be one of those nights God's just going to have to orchestrate the content, and somehow it's all going to make sense at the end, right? Let's just start with New York City. We've been told now for 6 months, if you even question the results of the 2020 presidential election, you're a threat to national security. You're a domestic terrorist, and all of the hyperbole. Well, guess what happened in New York? They had a mayoral election earlier this week. And now they've realized that the results are all wrong. They don't know what the results are. They haven't got a clue. Whatever numbers they put out, they've all been taken down. Now, this is a Democratic-run city in a Democratic mayoral primary, okay? So they controlled everything. And look how screwed up it is. Now, factor in a swing state, or let's just say a swing city like Atlanta or Philly or Detroit or Milwaukee or Phoenix in an important election that's going to chart the course of this nation? Are you telling me that people are wrong to question those results? Look at New York. They couldn't even get the mayoral, a Democratic primary. It's not even the main race yet. They're just trying to determine who the Democratic challenger is going to be. I guess the former guardian angel Curtis Sliwa is going to be the Republican nominee for the mayor. By the way, nice guy. I've been on his radio show a bunch of times over the years. But so this was the Democratic Party primary run by Democrats, and they haven't got a clue what the real numbers are. Unbelievable. By the way, the Department of Homeland Security, they put out a bulletin yesterday afternoon, an emergency bulletin saying that they are expecting a summer of violence, not by Antifa, not by Black Lives Matter, nope, by domestic terrorists, white nationalists, basically Trump supporters. They, of course, always throw this QAnon conspiracy nonsense. Listen, I got to be honest with you. I think I've met one person that even remotely gives any credence to that nonsense. But see, that's how, now we're back to this whole issue I told you about where's my train of thought here? Talking about the QAnon conspiracy. This goes, I've only met like one person, I think, that even entertains it. But remember a couple weeks ago, I spent a little bit of time in this program walking you through what is called media narratives. Narrative engineering was another term we used, right? Well, that's what the media is doing. The corporate, propagandists masquerading as media are doing. It's a media engineered narrative that anybody who voted for Donald Trump believes in wackadoo conspiracy theories, QAnon, when nobody does that. There's a fringe on the internet. They're such a small fraction. But anyway, the DHS put out this bulletin that they expect a summer of violence by basically Trump voters. Okay? Not BLM, not Trump voters. Now, they've been pressed. What type of, intelligence do you have to support this? How do you justify this statement? And of course, they had to admit they have no intelligence. Again, it's all part of this narrative that they're drumming up. We're going to get into 1/6 a little bit. It's getting more interesting by the day. And unfortunately, as I assumed early on, it's turned out to be a total government orchestrated, situation. Very sad. Let me say one thing about this whole Jill Biden cover of Vogue thing. Well, Vogue can do. Listen, they didn't have Nancy Reagan on there. They didn't have Laura Bush on there. So, I mean, that's fine. That's obviously a left-leaning publication. That's fine. But the gushy story inside was just a fairy tale. Because the media won't tell you, let me just help you understand something. Because the whole Joe Biden meeting on a blind date, that never happened. Listen, first of all, Joe Biden's first wife and child died in a car crash. For decades, he blamed it on a drunk truck driver. Well, that proved not to be true either. As it turned out, it was actually his dead ex-wife's fault for the accident. So that's first. Now, as far as Jill goes, one of Joe Biden's first real major supporters of his political career, very early on, was a guy in Delaware who happened to be married to a woman named Jill, a teacher named Jill. Okay? They were married. Joe Biden didn't meet Jill on a blind date. They started having an affair, an adulterous affair. And ultimately, Jill Biden left her first husband to be with Joe Biden. Okay? And listen, things happen, people get together, but at least be honest. At least be honest. She cheated on her first husband, who was one of Joe Biden's best friends and first supporters. Nice friend, right? And left that first husband, divorced him to be with Joe. So, I mean, stuff happens. I get it. Listen, 30 years of ministry, 22 years of live prayer, millions of emails over those years about, different personal situations like that. I get it. But don't sit there and spew some fairy tale. Turns out the U.S. Olympian that's under fire right now, Gwen Berry. And by the way, it's interesting that in the last 24 hours, in addition to what I shared with you on the program last night, how she should be kicked off the team. Actually, I didn't say it. I said she should be given the opportunity to apologize to the country and remain on the team. Or if she chooses not to, she doesn't have to be on the team. Now it turns out, if you understand amateur athletics, especially at that Olympic level, it's a real slog for these athletes, okay? Because they can't work, they're training all the time, so there's got to be some money coming from somewhere. So they usually have different sponsors. And again, it's hard for these athletes to raise money. I get that. But lo and behold, it turns out that the organization that's been sponsoring Gwen Berry, our hammer thrower that turned her back on the anthem and hates the country, says we're inherently racist, she has been sponsored by a uber progressive organization called Color of Change, who's big in the defund the police movement. So obviously, understanding that now, it makes a lot more sense. By the way, really interesting big tech story over the last few days that I'm sure went under the radar because they don't like to talk about it. But there's a radical liberal website called Right Wing Watch. They're supposedly a watchdog of conservatives and the right-wing media and all that. Actually, I've been a target of theirs dozens of times over the years. Not because I'm a political player, don't belong to a political super PAC, I'm not involved in party politics or anything like that. I'm an internet evangelist. So why is a conservative watchdog group going after an internet evangelist? Well, same reason Southern Poverty Law Center did. I tell the truth about God's plan for marriage and the family. I call sin what it is, especially the cultural sins that keep being pushed on the country, like homosexuality, the mental illness of transgenderism. According to the Bible, I correctly identify Islam as a false religion. So it's been in those contexts, of course, as I've been in the mainstream media, that they picked up on me. And anyway, just so you know who they are. They had their YouTube page pulled down the other day for violation of terms or something like that. Their catch-all phrase, right? And I got to be honest with you, a lot of people were saying, wow, because that is really the first far-left organization that I can remember, and a lot of people can remember, ever being not just censored, but taken down off of by the big tech monopolies. And, that was kind of interesting. But lo and behold, within 6 hours, they had put the site back up on YouTube, said they made a mistake, blah, blah, blah. So just when you thought they might have accidentally done something correct. Because again, this right-wing watch, it's just full of lies and gross inaccuracies, right? Mountain Brook, Alabama. Anybody that's familiar with the Birmingham area, Mountain Brook. Mountain Brook is where the old Birmingham money lives. It's the blue bloods of Birmingham. That's Mountain Brook. Accordingly, they have an incredibly high level school system in Mountain Brook, as you would expect. Well, lo and behold, turns out that the critical race theory nonsense was coming into Mountain Brook. Now, I can honestly tell you, having, my accountant is in Alabama. Back in my old life, I had all my shipping facilities out of Alabama. I had a home there for a while, so I'm very familiar with Birmingham. Those are not the people to be messing around with, because not only will they stand up, but they've got big money behind them. Needless to say, I don't believe critical race theory is going to be in the Mountain Brook school systems anymore. But here's the point I want to make, okay? And this is important. That's how prevalent this stuff is, to the point they're even trying to seep into like a place like Mountain Brook, Alabama. I mean, they are going to try to push that poison wherever they can. And no school system is immune. And to that end, where a lot of this action's been going on in Northern Virginia, don't forget, those Northern Virginia counties on the Potomac across from D.C., those are some of the wealthiest zip codes in the country. Like Mountain Brook. Now, Mountain Brook's, old blue blood money, right? Generational money, right? Whereas the suburbs of Virginia, they are primarily, government contractors. That's where a lot of your lobbyists live. So, that's just big government money there. And of course, that's been a hotbed for a lot of this stuff that's going on. If you were watching the program with me last year, you remember me saying over and over, they're never going to let these lockdowns just go by the wayside. They're never going to let these the masking mandates go by the wayside. And you now have over 1 million people locked down again in Australia. You have people locked down in London and several parts of Europe. You've got people that haven't started pushing lockdowns yet, but they're hinting at it here in this country. You are getting people that are going back to the whole you must wear a mask nonsense. And of course, this is all because of what? This is because of the Delta variant. All right. Even though you've got 40% of the country vaccinated. Now, at this point, I don't know how aggressive any of these idiot governors of places like Illinois, New Jersey, Baby Butcher Cuomo, New York, Wolf in Pennsylvania, Gavin Newsom in California. Oh, I got a great thing on him too. I don't know how aggressive they're going to push lockdowns, but they're all started. I mean, Murphy in New Jersey telling people, you're inside, you got to wear a mask. I mean, he's back with that nonsense again. Here's what this is primarily about, though. Again, I don't believe that they're going to have the ability to start the lockdown stuff. Now, again, they're doing it in Australia. They're doing it in London. They're doing it in several places around the European nations, right? But they are going to keep the mask thing going as a method of control, right? But the main reason that this is happening, just so you understand, is to continue to push what? The vaccine. That's primarily what this whole fear-mongering about the Delta variant, that's primarily what that is about right now. It's about pushing those who have have chosen not to be vaccinated to try to push them over the edge and get more people vaccinated. And again, pray, talk to your doctor, pray some more. If you're in that demographic that we know is the most at risk over 65, obese or other comorbidities, right? Heart, cancer, asthma, respiratory of any kind, right? It becomes a more important issue for you. But even the information we're getting now on this Delta variant, it's no more deadly than the original strain of the Chinese flu. Seems to be a little more infectious. That's starting to rise. But again, at the end of the day, it's not causing people any more problems than if they caught the original strain. And the mortality rate is almost identical. Speaking of Gavin Newsom for a second, I just want to go back to this whole election thing. Guess what happened in California yesterday? Now, as you know, they gathered up, I don't know, what was it, 500,000 signatures to recall the governor. And there's going to be a recall later this year to see whether he survives. Gavin Newsom got the democratically led and controlled legislature in California to actually change the election rules for the recall. And it pretty much stacks the deck to make it really difficult for him to be taken out of office because of these changes. I'm just going back. If you question the 2020 elections, you're a conspiracy theorist, you believe in QAnon, you want to overthrow the country, you're a radical white supremacist. How dare you question? How dare you put our democracy in jeopardy by questioning this? Yet the Democrats, thanks be to Jesus, thanks be to Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, without the filibuster gone, they're never going to be able to push that H1/S1, which basically federalizes the election, which allows them to basically put in place all of the things they used to cheat last time and make them actual law, and the states have no ability to counteract that. So, I mean, but that's why California's been a one-party state for the last 20 years and will continue to be as long as you and I are alive, I guarantee you that. Because they rigged the elections, they got control, then they passed laws so they'd never lose power. Now you got Gavin Newsom under the gun to be recalled, changing the rules of the upcoming recall election to make sure he's not recalled. This is how it works, folks. And I hope this gives some people some confidence and some inspiration in the fight for what really happened in 2020, because that fight's really just starting to get good. We should be hearing some initial things out of Arizona really any day now, and their full report coming sometime at the end of July, first week of August. And Georgia's pushing hard to do a similar forensic recount in Atlanta, Fulton County. They're pushing hard in Pennsylvania. Oh, I got an interesting thing to tell you about Pennsylvania. Oh, do I have I'll get to that next. But they're also pushing Michigan and Wisconsin, which again had obvious issues with how they conducted their election. So don't be shy about questioning it. I know you're going to get shouted down. You're going to get, they'll try to intimidate you, calling you, again, if you question the election, you're a white nationalist, you hate the country, blah, 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 right? But when it suits them, they have no problem changing election laws to make sure they don't lose, right? Let me talk about Cosby real quick, okay? One thing I think we all learned, and I don't think is even debatable at this point, he's a horrible man. I mean, that's just a fact. And you know what the interesting? It really traces back to that initial period of real outward rebellion. I'm talking about the mid-'60s. You know, we had a very legitimate civil rights movement rise up in those days and cleaned up a lot of those problems with voting rights and discrimination, right? Very legitimate. But don't forget, that was also the time we had the rise of the women's movement. which, as I've always said, started out very legitimate issues, very legitimate. It was hijacked very soon by people like Gloria Steinem, and the radical feminist movement hijacked that initial legitimate women's right movement. That was mid-60s. Then you had all of the just total rebellion against authority. The police were now called pigs, fuzz, the man, right? Rebellion against government. Anything the government did had to be bad. Rebellion against God. The whole God is dead movement started in the mid-60s. You also had the rise of the rebellious free love period. Lots of drugs, lots of just wanton sex with whoever, whatever, whenever, right? And again, please don't misunderstand me. I'm making no excuses for Cosby. He is a horrible, evil guy. That is irrefutable by now. Legalities, whatever the legalities are, they are. But it doesn't change who he was, and probably who he is still to some extent, because he's been very unrepentant. But Cosby he was really the first black superstar on TV in the mid-60s. I Spy and some of those shows, right? And obviously a very famous guy. He used to hang around all the time at the Playboy Mansion with Hugh Hefner. This was in the heyday of Playboy in the 60s and the 70s and into the 80s. And you had all this going on. And back in those days, again, sex and drugs were like inseparable. It was all part of the same scene. And that was common. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying, obviously, it's not right in any shape or form. But that was the scene, especially the Hollywood scene back in those days. And I guess he got comfortable drugging women, and that just became his MO down the road. Now, the legalities, they are what they are. It was clearly obvious that he was given an immunity deal from prosecution to testify in the civil trials, and he agreed to that, and thus basically gave up his Fifth Amendment protection to testify because he was given the assurance they would not prosecute him criminally. That really became the foundation for this thing being overturned. Let me say this. He's been in jail 2.5 years right now. I don't know how long the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's been sitting on this decision. But if anybody thinks that this decision was announced today was just coincidence, that's just when it was ready, that's just how it came out. I've got some oceanfront property in Iowa to sell you. Okay. What else was going on today? What else was the big news item of the day? Well, that would be former President Donald Trump going down to the real southern border, meeting with the Border Patrol people, meeting with the sheriffs, accompanied by Texas Governor Abbott, right? And that was a big deal because it was going to once again highlight the absolute failure of the Biden administration, which in their eyes isn't a failure at all because it was done purposely. But that was going to be the spotlight of the day. Now, I had no illusions. I knew the mainstream media was probably hardly going to cover it, if at all, to begin with. But all of a sudden, about the time Trump lands in Texas and they start their little motorcade to the border, the real border, where all the problems are, lo and behold, out of nowhere, newsflash, Bill Cosby's getting out of jail. Supreme Court of Pennsylvania overturns his conviction. Now, just so you don't think I'm out of my mind, the Trump administration has been going after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court now for months and months and months because they haven't really ruled against them as far as on the merits of what they claim happened in Pennsylvania during the 2020 election. They just refuse to hear the cases at all. And that's been true in all these jurisdictions. You always hear they've lost 69 cases. They're 0 for 60. No, they have not lost any case yet because there's not one court that's heard the merits yet. And they pushed the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania over and over from different ways. And the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania just won't budge. So my guess is, Supreme Court justices in states and our federal Supreme Court, they're people. They're people. And I have no doubt in my mind that you're never going to be able to prove it in case somebody somehow tells the truth one day, but I have no doubt in my mind that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, who's not happy with the Trump people to begin with, had no problem releasing this bombshell that they're letting Cosby out of jail pretty much about the same hour Trump was landing in Texas, which was going to be the big news item on the day in all respects. No matter how much coverage CNN, MSN, it was still going to be the number one news issue of the day. So, again, anybody that's watched this program has learned one thing I've hopefully helped you understand if you didn't already. There are no such things as coincidences. Okay? No such thing as coincidences. 100-year anniversary tomorrow of the CCP and their corporate media lapdogs are just so excited. CNN had this glowing report about the Chinese Communist Party and Chairman Xi. Of course they do, because they're all in bed with the Chinese. That's why they blocked all reporting about the real possibility, matter of fact, the main possibility of this Chinese flu coming out of that lab and not from, the wet markets. So we got that going on tomorrow. Canada is jailing pastors right and left. Now, here's how they're doing it. They're using the Chinese flu excuse to shut the churches. Almost all churches in Canada have been shut down for 15 months now. I mean, it's worse than here, believe it or not. And those few pastors that have been standing up, they're not just getting a slap on the wrist. They're getting thrown in jail. They're talking 2-3 years of jail time for having church. But see, remember what I told you, and the reason I'm talking to you about Canada, I told you about their new hate laws, where $50,000 fine, a year in jail. What do they consider hate speech? I guarantee you, anything out of the Bible. The globalists, they have to take power first, then their next mission is to crush Christianity. The globalists are pretty much control Canada. Trudeau's a globalist, his daddy was. The legislature up in Canada, nationally and in the provinces, they're all globalist. So Canada is pretty much in the globalist, back pocket. So now they're going after the church to crush Christianity, and it's happening up there. It's like China throwing pastors in prison for 2 years for holding church in violation of Canada's health laws. Ugh. By the way, Dr. Fauci accidentally told the truth today. He was on some, not TV, but he's in some kind of a Zoom meeting or something. And he said there's going to be big differences in this country between the regions of the country that are vaccinated and the regions of the country that aren't vaccinated. Thank you, Dr. Fauci. And he accidentally perfectly described the current civil war we're under. And again, it's not just about the vaccine. It's about everything. It's about faith values. It's about traditional values of the country. It's about individual exceptionalism. It's about our freedoms, our rights that we hold so dear, versus these states that are primarily run by globalists who want the government in charge and just get rid of all that other nonsense. So Fauci accidentally uttered a few truths today. Big tech. Their big issues, just so you know where they're at, their big issues are blocking anything that condemns Antifa. I found that very interesting because as I've been going through some different resources that have been really tracking what they're blocking anything that speaks out against the vax, and they're censoring anybody that's really taking a hard line against Antifa. Isn't that great? So you got big tech. They're of course in bed with the Democratic Party. They're in bed with our government. You got reports coming out all the time. And I'm going to get to this whole NSA thing with Tucker in a second. But big tech plays a role in this too, because big tech has pretty much opened their doors to our government in terms of gaining information. For instance, Microsoft, obviously part of big tech. Where's a lot of the public interaction with Microsoft? Well, Hotmail, right? Emails, right? And it's been reported that the government's making requests of Microsoft all the time for access to various Hotmail accounts, right? They got Google. Of course, you got a couple things with Google. You got YouTube. You've got Gmail. And you've got the Google browser. Once again, lots of interaction between the government and Google for information on different people. In other words, the big tech companies, Facebook, Twitter, they're basically giving the government access to whatever information they want from people that are on their platforms. You remember a few years ago, it's probably been 4 or 5 years, I think it was around Christmas, you had the Muslim terrorist and his wife that killed a bunch of people at, I guess it was his workplace. They went and shot up the place at a Christmas party or something like that. And apparently he had an iPhone and Apple refused to unlock the iPhone for the government. Of course, they should have just taken it to any 10-year-old kid walking up and down the street. They probably could do it in 5 minutes. And that was such a big deal. Apparently all those boundaries are all gone now, because there is a symbiotic relationship between big tech and our government, especially the Department of Justice, the FBI, and our intelligence agencies. And you know what? They can just lie like they did to get all that to get all that access, all that information on Trump over the years. Well, we have a good we have a good reason to believe that this person's involved in some international terrorism. I mean, they just lie. They make it up. All right, let me just spend a minute on this whole NSA thing with Tucker. If you're not familiar, Tucker Carlson, he's got the highest rated cable news show by far right now. And a lot of it's because he has, listen, Tucker Carlson's been around for a long time, all right? I mean, he's been everywhere. He was on the old MSNBC back in the days when Michael Savage was on, Laura Ingraham was on there. Who else? I think Ann Coulter had a show for a minute on there. Geraldo was on there. I mean, this is going back 20, 25 years. Long before MSNBC turned into the corporate slaves that they are. But he was on there then he was at CNN. He was on that show Crossfire. Remember, he had the bow tie and all that. Tucker's an interesting guy. He's legitimately a trust fund baby. His father's second wife, Tucker's stepmother, was heir to the Swanson frozen dinner fortune, okay? So he grew up in prep schools and all that. But hardworking guy. Started the Daily Caller, which is, a fairly legitimate conservative website. And of course, he's really, blown up over at Fox because he does a lot of research. He does his homework. He says things that very few people, even on cable television, will talk about. And because of that, he's obviously made a lot of enemies. But apparently he had a whistleblower inside the NSA tell him that all of his private emails and stuff were being pulled by the NSA, the National Security Agency, and for whatever purposes, who knows. He exposed it on his show, got into a big back and forth with the NSA, and I think Donald Trump can tell people that you don't win a war with the intelligence agencies. You just don't. Do you remember Chuck Schumer? Here's another one to stretch your memory. You remember Chuck Schumer, right after Trump was elected, and he was talking about how the intelligence people were spying on him and all that stuff, and everybody was calling him an idiot. And Chuck Schumer, he was on some show, some MSNBC show actually, and I remember him saying to those, you don't mess with the intelligence agencies because they've got 6 ways to Sunday to get you. Boy, he was right on the money. That was a prescient quote if I ever heard one. But so we'll see what happens with this, but it's obvious he's being targeted for some reason. Or what they do a lot of times, because they're technically not allowed to target U.S. citizens, okay? But what they do is they'll target somebody in your orbit that isn't a U.S. citizen. And they'll use that excuse then to draw your stuff into that investigation. That's how it works. Because technically, they're not allowed to target U.S. citizens, but, that's obviously nonsense because they just find other ways to get it. That's what Carter Page was a nobody in the Trump campaign. The only reason he became anybody is because they set him up with a foreign plant. That then gave the NSA the ability to draw him into that investigation, and by association, dragged all the Trump people and Trump himself into that whole web. So they ultimately wanted to spy on Trump and his top people, but you're not allowed to spy on U.S. citizens. So even though Carter Page is a U.S. citizen, they were able to get him with a plant who was foreign. And that takes us to 1/6. Listen, my friends, the more and more information that's coming out is 1/6 was a government orchestrated event. That's because the head of the Proud Boys, which is the supposed white nationalist group that's going to take over the country, turns out he's got a long history of being a government informant and a government asset. Meaning he goes out and does what the government tells him to do. Don't forget, and this is what solidifies, at least in my mind, and what's coming out day by day is bearing fruit. Don't forget, 2-3 weeks before the election, you had this plot to kidnap and maybe even kill Michigan Governor Whitmer by these white racists or white nationalists, white supremacists. Turns out now the people that orchestrate were government plants. They got a couple dopes to agree to some things on some emails. They were never going to kidnap Governor Whitmer. It's a total staged event by the FBI. And, well, let me put it to you this way. There is a news source out there that does all of its homework. It's called Revolver.News. Revolver.News. Darren Beatty is the guy that runs it. He's a former Trump speechwriter, but the guy does his homework, and his reporting on this has been proven to be right on the money. And so you can get more details if you're interested, but just suffice it to say, 1/6, as each day goes by, is clearly becoming evident that it was a government operation. And you say, well, why? I'll tell you why. So they could now declare that basically the 75 million people that voted for Trump, primarily white men who are Christians, are the greatest threat to our homeland. And you've heard that. They've actually, you've got the Attorney General, you've got the head of the FBI, you've got the head of Homeland Security on record saying that. With no evidence whatsoever. They haven't said a word about BLM, Antifa. Now, we know the results of what has happened the last year with those organizations. $1 billion plus damage to cities all over the country. 1,200 law enforcement officers injured. Arson. Millions and millions of dollars of looted merchandise. I mean, that's the factual track record of Antifa and Black Lives Matter in this past year. Those are facts. Yet they're not a threat to the homeland. White nationalists, Trump voters. Oh, yeah, here's my Joe Biden. Trump voters, Christians. Thank God, man. But that's what 1/6 was about. They knew there was going to be 300, 400, 500,000 people on the ellipse that morning listen to the president's speech. And there was. They knew D.C. was going to be full of people. Why do you think Nancy Pelosi refused 10,000 National Guard troops the day before? Just to be on hand in case. She refused. And now she's trying to push through this 1/6 commission, which is going to be just like the impeachment, the bogus impeachment committees both times. It's going to be full of people like Chinese spy loving Swalwell, Shifty Schiff, Nadler. It's going to be full of those kind of people. And they're going to officially say at the end that Donald Trump incited this insurrection. But you notice they've got 500 cases. Nobody's being charged with insurrection because there was no insurrection. It's going to be interesting because there's too many people that are pushing too hard for this stuff. And I'll tell you right now, why do you think, here's the most important fact that you need to understand. They've got 1,400 hours of surveillance footage from the Capitol building. And trust me, every square inch of that building is covered by surveillance cameras. Every square inch. They won't let anybody see it. Why? I'm 99% sure. I know why. They can't afford to let people see that. California says that they will no longer pay for any state business trips to Florida and 4 other states. The reason being Florida and these 4 other states that they won't spend state money on. In other words, they won't do any business with those states is because they had the audacity to say to boys who were born boys, even if you want to call yourself a girl, you're not going to play girls' sports. I still don't understand why this is even an issue. It's like I was always so curious why churches were fighting over whether they should embrace gay marriage or not. I mean, that's not even no. Here, let me help you. No. You don't have to think about it. No. There's nothing to discuss. Just like I don't believe there's anything to discuss in this issue. Just because somebody's mentally ill and he's a male and he's mentally ill and he thinks he's a girl, doesn't mean you go play girls' sports. That's totally unfair. Parents, grandparents, let me just give you another thing to pay attention to. obviously people are really waking up and doing a good job paying attention to this whole critical race stuff. But let me tell you the other thing that they're really pushing hard in these schools, and that is a hyper-sexualized curriculum, starting in the first grade. They're pushing homosexuality is perfectly normal, natural, wonderful. They're pushing transgendered garbage down the throats of kids who don't even have a clue what all this stuff is about. But trust me, and I know I've warned you about this before, but at least now that people are waking up to this whole hyper-racist garbage that they're trying to push, you also need to be aware of the hyper-sexual curriculum many of these school districts are adopting. Stuff that kids in grades 1 through 5 don't need to know about. And again, I'm not talking about, just basic anatomy type stuff. I think I got some of that in a health class in 3rd grade, but it was the basics, right? It was so you couldn't be confused if you're a boy or a girl, okay? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about pushing actual sexual perversion on kids. Teaching kids in the 1st grade how to masturbate. Teaching kids in these low grades that it's no big difference if you're involved sexually with someone. They are pushing this stuff harder than you can even understand. By the way, go back to California for a second. Oh my goodness! Sometimes I got to tell you something. I'm glad there's not a camera on me most of the day, because sometimes I just break down and start laughing like a crazy man. Governor Newsom, California. Remember I told you about a week ago? They were telling people, turn your air conditioners off, conserve electricity because the state doesn't have enough electricity. There's going to be rolling blackouts. He came out with a statement the other day telling people to please don't charge your electric cars due to our power shortage. So if you were dumb enough to go get an electric car, now you're not allowed to charge it because of the power shortage. And by the way, what's going to happen when they have the rolling blackouts and you need your car charged so you can go to work? Bunch of idiots. And if I hear Biden one more time talk about these 500,000 charging stations he wants to put out as infrastructure, what a bunch of, let's see. As we go off the air tonight, June will be gone. We'll be in the month of July. Half the year's gone. But we're in the final minutes of Gay Pride Month. I was looking through, because again, I consume a lot of international news sources. And I made it a point this morning to go through a bunch of my international news sources, starting June 1st through today, to see how many gay pride parades they had in China, how many gay pride events they had in Turkey, how many gay pride events they had in Pakistan, how many gay pride parades they had in Saudi Arabia. You know what I found out? They didn't have any. Zero. All right, let's see if I want to get to any. I'm going to get to the suburbs tomorrow. Let's see if I want to. Let me just say one last thing, since former President Trump was at the border today. Do you remember early in his administration, they were ripping him pillar to post because he's separating families, putting kids in cages. You had the media down on the border every day. You had AOC down there crying her eyes out at a fence when there was nobody around. She wasn't even near the facility, just a photo op, right? Remember all that? And the cages actually turned out to be not anything Donald Trump built. They were there from the Biden-Obama era, right? Now we have kids down there stacked up like logs, diseased, sexually abused. Some of them don't even make it into that hellhole. They die on the journey. And not a peep. Not a peep. Of course, the Biden administration has kept all media away from any of these facilities. But just like we get leaks out of the Uyghur camps in Western China, we get a lot of leaks from people because the abhorrent conditions that tens of thousands of these illegal kids are living in. All right, we got through a lot of content today. We'll catch everything else up tomorrow. What's left? Ugh. Let me say something that I don't mean to say to intimidate anybody. I don't mean to scare anybody. I'm not a fear monger, but I'm a realist, okay? Last Sunday night, when people in that collapsed tower in Miami went to bed, I assume, rightly so, they were looking forward to getting a good night's sleep, getting up in the morning and doing whatever they had to do that day. Well, as they laid in their beds, sleeping, the tower came crashing down. And it looks like, at this point, I think there's 16 now confirmed dead, 140 some still. They're going to find those other, probably the bulk of those 140 in the rubble at some point. All I'm saying is, and I remind you this often, the Bible says tomorrow's promised to none of us. And I doubt most people are going to die such a horrific death. But hey, people go out driving down the street to get a gallon of milk and some idiot runs a stop sign and they never make it home. People wake up in the morning, they got a headache, and a couple days later, it won't go away. They go to the doctor, find out they got a brain tumor, inoperable, dead in a week. Again, I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just telling you the truth, because we deal with this stuff every day. And again, I know most people are not going to endure a horrific death like those people in that tower. But that's what happened. They went to bed that night. And in the middle of the night, as they were sleeping, tons and tons and tons of concrete literally squished them to death. So all I'm telling you is, at some point, we're all going to take that last breath. And when we do, the only thing that matters, do you have a relationship with Jesus? And if you've never made that decision, I'm going to give you a chance to do that now. Pray with me. Dear Lord, tonight I come to you confessing my sins, confessing that I am a sinner, asking your forgiveness. Lord, tonight I believe in my heart, I confess with my mouth, Jesus Christ is my Lord and is my Savior. I invite you into my heart and life tonight. I surrender my life to you. Use me for your glory. From this day forward, I belong to you. In Jesus' name I pray. And my friend, if you prayed and you meant it, the Bible says you're saved, not because of the words, they're just a verbal guide for your faith, because of God's grace and your faith. And if you need prayer for anything, please don't hesitate to email me, bkellerlibrary.com. And Lord willing, we'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. God bless you.
What problems are you dealing with in your life right now?
Do you feel like giving up? Times are hard and you're not strong. Well, I know the answer for you, and it will lead